Good morning, everyone, and thank you for taking the time out to hear me talk about steel. XA Global Trade Advisors, some of you would know, does exactly what it says on the label. We're a global trade advisory business, and obviously something like this very big steel review sits right in our wheelhouse. Let me get kicked off with what all of this means. So it's a very strange gazette that just came out with this preliminary determination, and it's strange because it is very unusual for ITAC. In fact, not unusual, unprecedented for ITAC to publish a preliminary determination in a tariff investigation. So usually these go from a decision at the commission to the minister. At this point, they've said, look, what we're going to do is we are going to tell you what we're proposing to do, and we're going to take another round of comment. And I think for this, ITAC should be commended. It is really good to give the heads up as opposed to what normally happens. And so we're at least hopeful that this is the start of a new way of conducting such investigations. Now, before we get into all of the detail, just probably the single most important thing you all need to be completely aware of is that unless you have an extension, you have until the 3rd of September to respond to these findings. If you do have something to say, and there are good reasons to have a say, then please don't miss the deadline. Otherwise, there's a better than even chance that your comments will not be taken into account. So let's go back to March of this year and have a look at what was being considered at that time. And so at this point, ITAC was considering the creation of some rebates. They wanted to reduce the prices of some locally sourced inputs like iron ore, etc. They wanted to look at raising the tariffs on some locally made products, removing rebates, which they thought was being abused. They wanted to put some import control in place, put a reference pricing under which you couldn't clear your goods, and really give more attention to customs fraud, which I think most of you in the sector would agree is a really, really serious problem. Now, the scope of the report, let's have a look at what came out in this. So 460 tariff codes are affected by the proposals in the preliminary report. So there are some codes in the original investigation that have been dropped, but there's still 460, and it still covers 51.5 billion rands worth of imports, and it covers 16,500 traders. Now, some of these are very small, some might even be in the wrong category, but it is and still remains an unbelievably pervasive review. So I want to go through, to start with, what is the difference between what we have now and what was in the original Gazette. So what has been dropped from here, and to be clear, if it's been dropped from here, it does not mean that it will not end up with some kind of final decision, but I think we can reasonably assume from what ITAC has done that their intention, short of whatever is submitted at this point, which I'm sure they'll take into account, their intention is to impose what is being proposed here. So the first thing that has disappeared is the question of the raw materials. So this was in the original investigation. They wanted to look at some kind of export control on iron ore and coal, and this has now disappeared. I don't know what the status is, so maybe there's something else that's going to happen here, but for now, this appears to have fallen out, at least from this preliminary stage that we're at now. There were 3 rebates, most of them related to corrosion-resistant steel. There were 3 rebates that were going to be removed. There was concern at the time that these were being abused. And these rebates appear to also have been dropped. In other words, the rebates will probably remain as far as we can tell. They will no longer be removed. The next issue that was put forward originally is that they would have tariff rate quotas. So, and that could either have meant that you have a certain level of duty for a limited quantity, so the first couple of tons of a given product. And then beyond that, when that volume has been exceeded, you either pay a higher duty or you're even prohibited from importing. This too appears for now to have been dropped from ITAC's assessment. They spoke of new compulsory standards. We see no mention of this. But in fairness to ITAC, this would not be sitting with them. This would sit with the National Compulsory Regulator of Standards, the NRCS, and we can find no evidence yet that they have published new standards for comment, but at the same time, no reason to think that has disappeared. They might just be a little slow off the mark, so we will have to see. In the original case, there was concern raised that there would be increased import surveillance. There were concerns around environmental and safety concerns around certain products. This too, we see no further evidence of, for now at least. And so we wait to see how that will be addressed. They mentioned that they were going to do more to address customs fraud. Like I said, this is a very big deal in this particular sector, but this report makes no mention of any actions being taken to reduce fraud. The other big issue was minimum import reference pricing, which we argued at the time we believed would be in breach of the WTO valuation agreement. But this also appears to have disappeared now. So these are the things that appear, for now at least, to be gone. Of course, nothing stops ITAC putting out another report a little bit later on with some findings on this. But for now, they don't appear to be impacted in the very short term. So if we have a look at what is in, which is kind of what we're going to get stuck into now. So what is in? And so here we have the tariff codes that are impacted in some way by this proposed preliminary position that ITAC have put forward. And you can see here that the bulk of the trade that is being covered in some way or another sits in chapters 72 and 73. Now, remember that some of what ITAC are proposing to do is to increase duties, but in other cases, for example, they will be imposing import control. So this is the value of trade that is in total impacted, which is quite a lot, as you can tell. This is the portion that is impacted by the proposed duty increase. Now, you will see here the chapters on the previous slide weighted heavily towards chapter 72, but in reality, lots of chapter 72 is already at the bound rate. Where the largest number of increases are coming from is chapter 73. So 73 are things like pipes, for example. So fabricated steel product, and then chapter 82, and the reason 82 is moving up so much, 82 is things like tools and implements, is because so much of 82 didn't have a duty beforehand. So that is where the big increases are, even though most of the trade is through 72. There are over 10,000 importers potentially impacted by an increase, but 72%, 72 importers, my apologies, account for 50% of this risk. So 72 companies are going to foot the bill for half of this value, and 16 cover 25. And those 16 that are covering 25% of the potential duty increase account for 21% of all imports. So there are a small group of companies, I suppose 16 is not that small, there's a medium-sized group of companies which are in line to take a particularly heavy hit. And even within that, again, this concentrates quite a bit. So there's a small number of companies that are facing a very large and unpleasant increase should ITAC go through. Now, if you're on that list, the game is not over at this point. If you feel like you have more to say about this, you still have that opportunity until next Wednesday. If you do need an extension, we'd encourage you to apply for one if that is what is required. Now, what's also interesting is just how concentrated the effect of the whole investigation is. So 85 traders account for 50% of the imports in the last year that we have data for. And so this is now covering not just a duty increase, but import control and all the other things that ITAC are proposing to do. So again, relatively small number as a percentage of the total, which are going to find themselves with a potential problem. Now, it should be pointed out that because you're being gifted a duty increase, doesn't for a minute mean that you don't also potentially face an import control. As producers, a number of producers argued for duty increases, and those arguments have been heard. So let's dive into, for a second, the creation of import controls. So the import controls are very interesting because the rules around the conditions that can be attached to import controls are quite loose. Or let me put it differently. ITAC has a tremendous amount of leeway to insert whatever conditions they think they would like to insert as part of giving you a permit. And so you should be aware the fact that you're eligible, your product that you may not be able to get locally, or even if you can buy it locally, but you choose to import it, the conditions that can be attached to this, you should not make an assumption that applying for the permit means you will get the permit. And the difference between a permit and or an import control versus a duty increase is that if you do not have permission, that does not only mean you can't get the rebate, it means that you may not be permitted to do the import. So the permit is exactly that. It grants you permission and we don't at this point know what the rules will be on those permits. We only know there will be permits. And so the rules of those permits can be truly very far-reaching. When we have those rules, of course, we will let everyone know what they are. But as they stand, they are covering a staggering amount of trade, and you should be aware of that. Now, coupled to this, a little bit earlier this year, ITAC published a gazette that said, look, we're a bit inundated with the number of permits we're now administering. You can see here that they're going to add a huge amount more. We need to employ more people to help with this, and so we want to start charging for permits. So connected to this will not only be a permit, but the permit will come at a price that we don't know what that price will be yet. That has not yet been gazetted. And so we don't know what the conditions will be, and we don't know what the price of the permit will be, nor do we have any sense for how long it will take to get a permit issued. So lots and lots of unknowns in this particular area, which of course is problematic. But as we find out more, we'll be sure to let you know. And by the way, just a quick punt for our blog. If you are not subscribed, please do. That is the place where we would typically update our clients and anyone else. We can't sort of be contacting hundreds of companies each time. So that is the place to go to if you want to find out when these things come out. But ITAC, in fairness, are also proposing the creation of some rebates, and but companies here do need to step up and motivate We can see no reason why, if you think a rebate is missing here, that cannot be motivated for. But you should not make an assumption that because the rebate is proposed here, that the rebate will automatically be given. So the potential value of duty savings in a year, if these rebates go through, is just shy of 300 million. So a significant amount of money. You do not want to have been that company that didn't submit their motivation and then consequently finds themselves without the rebate that you thought would be automatic. There are some tariff codes, so 32 out of the hundreds originally proposed will remain duty-free. Almost all of these, although not exclusively, relate to stainless steel. So the proposed increases are pretty much all on mild steel products. But you want to double check, make sure where you sit, but there are still some, at least, that are duty free. All right, diving into the areas we find a little confusing and that we're still waiting for clarity on. And again, when we have the clarity, we'll get back to you. The first one is this. So in the original Gazette, they made mention of potentially activating Article 19 of the GATT. In this particular Gazette, they say, and this is a direct quote from the Gazette, a preliminary determination that the ongoing geopolitical landscape does constitute an unprecedented emergency, necessitating urgent action in line with Article 19 and Article 21 of the GATT. Now, this is confusing because Article 19 manifests as a safeguard investigation. This is not a safeguard. And so a safeguard investigation allows duties to be raised above the bound rate for a limited period, typically a 3-year period. There isn't a safeguard here, but there are lots of other safeguards in the steel sector at the moment. So we don't know what they mean by Article 19. There doesn't appear to be a different way that Article 19 can manifest other than as a safeguard. And then Article 21 is a national security emergency. That too doesn't appear to be the condition met here. Although in fairness, the US has lowered the standard rather dramatically on what is a national security emergency. So we were trying to find out from ITAC what they mean by this, but the actions that have been taken here have nothing to do with these articles. And so if this means something is going to follow on, we don't know what that something is, and we are trying to find out. So we don't have an answer to that. They also proposed the creation of an advisory committee. And this advisory committee is proposed to be created in terms of Section 14 of the ITA Act. So Section 14 does indeed allow that. And let me explain just some characteristics of such a committee. This is not everything, by the way, but these are the kind of the highlights from the legislation you should be aware of. So the commission at ITAC recommends the members of the committee. Now, how they make that selection is up to them. They could publish a gazette. They could say to the industry, we're calling on nominations, but ultimately they go to the minister and we say, we want these people to be on the committee. They propose who the chair of the committee should be, and they propose the terms of reference for the committee. Now, until the minister signs off, you don't actually have a functioning committee, but that is the kind of the important bit, that ITAC is or I should say the commission at ITAC is the body that essentially chooses the composition of the committee. Now, there are a couple of other rules that are important here. Half the members of the committee must also be commission members at ITAC. There isn't a size limit on the committee, but I suppose if you put the whole of the commission on, then it can only be double that size. I say only because the commission's already quite big, but I'm presuming they're not going to do that. So half of the committee members must be commissioners. Now, the committee makes recommendations. The committee is not a decision-making body, but those recommendations are decided on by way of a vote. And so the non-commissioned members of the committee are not allowed to cast a vote. So their role is purely advisory. And then what happens is those decisions ultimately only become effective if they are ratified by the commission. So the committee does not have any ability to kind of implement anything. It's an advisory body to the commission. Now, I have a couple of concerns around this. This is not the first such commission that's been created. We have to be very careful that the representation here represents the industry and not only certain members of the industry. So we want to avoid a situation, for example, that happened with the Steel Master Plan, where you ended up with working groups that had special access to certain people. You had all kinds of quite nefarious behavior evolving. There was lots of secrecy around what was going on. And then certain portions of that value chain suddenly found themselves on the wrong side of certain policies, while others benefited. So the selection of that committee is important. I mean, that is up to the commission, but I would argue the industry needs to be cautious, and you want to make sure that you are properly represented, whoever you may be. I'm saving most of our time in this conversation for questions, because last time we got absolutely flooded. Let me just remind everyone, you have until next week, Wednesday, the 3rd of September, to make your submissions, unless you have an extension. I mean, it goes without saying, you should obviously contact us to help you, but you certainly are not obliged. But either way, please make your voice heard. Otherwise, you should not complain afterwards when you don't get what you want to get. And I'm going to go straight into questions from here. Nadia, have we received any questions so far?
Yes, we do. The first one is from Annalise Warrington. Hi, Annalise. Do these traders know what they are impacted, as I found many are not aware of it?
Oh, yeah. Oh, and I see Ryan's got his hand up. We'll take his question next. So I'm 100% sure, Annalise, that lots of traders are unaware of what is happening here. We're dealing with a client at the moment who only found out about this after a completely unrelated interaction with the DTIC. So I'm pretty sure the vast majority of people impacted do not know. Annika, how many companies responded to the original Gazette? Annika?
Sorry, 112 companies responded.
Yeah. So yes, and some of those were asking for increases, some for reductions, but no, I don't think so. Ryan, you have the floor. If you can just unmute and speak.
Unmute. Okay, there we go. Hi, thank you very much. Listen, it feels like you've chucked me in a bucket of ice water at the moment, so this is not good news. There was a couple of comments. One is you're talking about the number of traders that are affected, and it's a relatively small number. As an end user, if the trader is going to pay a massive duty, the downstream is going to pay it. That's a comment. I think that anybody that's maybe not directly affected but is buying these things can expect that cost to be passed on to the user. So that's just a one comment, and that really concerns me. And I've had a look at some of what was needed to get a rebate, and this is also, again, sorry, a comment, is one of the things is then they demand company turnover, full accounts, BEE statuses, and this is opens the door to legislative overreach, where you can actually start controlling companies because they need to import materials, and that is a massive concern for me. And just another last comment is, it seems like now it's pushing more and more towards mild steel, which speaks to the narrative of the concern of what is this review all about in the first place. So yeah, there's nothing good that I'm hearing here, and I think we should as industry be extremely concerned about what's happening. So sorry, Donald, not really questions but comments. And it's not well announced that we've got another 4 days or another 7 days in which to comment. It's sort of, I mean, and as personally, I did make a comment. I asked for the information to be submitted, but I've received nothing to say that it's been gazetted and that it's open for me to review it. I mean, they put the onus on companies to be keeping their ear to the ground to hear this sort of thing. So yeah, very, very scary stuff.
Well, Ryan, I just want to add one comment quickly to what you've said. So the information they are requesting for the rebates is par for the course. If you were to proactively, let's just say this wasn't part of this investigation, and you went knocking on ITAC's door and said, I want duty relief on this, the information they would gather from you there is exactly what they're asking for here. So this is not special. It is intrusive. But ITAC would have a view like this, that before we can make an informed decision, we need to know enough about what you're asking for to be able to look at the costs and benefits to the whole industry. And so that is why they ask for it. I should point out to everyone, though, that this is managed under quite a strict confidentiality regime at ITAC. So the legislation is quite strict in this space. I can't talk to ITAC's management in reality of that, but there is a very strict regime, and they simply can't share your information with anyone else. If that was
it's quite worrying that they will make a decision for your company with the success or failure of your company based on what they consider important. It's quite scary. I don't know. That's my feeling.
Yeah. Understand, but that is exactly what happens in the trade policy space. They're winners and losers, and ITAC have the unenviable job of trying to work out what to do. Whether they always get it right, yeah, that's a different question. Susan. You're muted. Can't hear you, Susan.
Donald, we've got some more questions in the
yes.
Q&A section.
Okay,
Maybe
good point.
we can continue with those.
Just by the way, when you guys have an opportunity to speak, if you could just introduce yourself and which company you're from, that would be good. Michael asks, you mentioned that chapters 72, 73, 82, and 83 will be impacted, which correspond to the different numbers of tariff codes. Where can you access the affected tariff codes? Michael, we have that. And in fact, Nadia, can I ask you, when you circulate the content of all of this, please get the detail of that from Annika, and then we'll put that out, Michael, to everyone who has attended, so you guys can have a look. If you want to, by the way, understand the impact on your own business and want some help with that, you can contact us, and we can help you measure very accurately what the direct impact is, no matter which side you are on. Susan, I'll come back to you in a second, and then we'll see if we've got your audio working. And anonymous, relating to automotive, the answer quite simply is we'd be very happy to sit with NAMSA and NARCAM and have a look at how they're affected. I do believe they are affected, but we haven't taken a view at this point on what the downstream sectors are, but we have the information. It's just a question of sitting with you guys and seeing what we can do. So if you could just drop me an email, whoever anonymous is, and we'll have a look. Another important, a different anonymous, I assume, how will stock on the water be treated? When and how will the cutoff be determined? All right, so let me explain this. Your whatever the duty is at the time you do your clearance is the duty that you're going to pay. So if you put your clearance through today and the duty is imposed tomorrow, you will not pay. If you put the duty in on Friday and the duty is imposed tomorrow, then you will pay the duty. You can shift the date that you are liable for your duty, but by pre-clearing your product. So pre-clearing you can do as soon as your goods have left on their final journey to South Africa. So what that means is if your goods are shipping from China and they're coming straight from Shanghai to Durban, then as soon as they leave Shanghai and the final bill of lading is issued, you can put your clearance through. If they stop first in Singapore, then you have to wait for them to leave Singapore, and then you can put your clearance through. That obviously moves earlier the moment that you have to pay your duty, but it does lock in your duty at an earlier date, which should lower the risks. I mean, that's essentially it, though. There isn't anything else you can do. Susan, let's see if we can hear you this time. Susan? Susan, perhaps just mute again, or possibly even leave and come back. That might be better. I'm going to move on to Naila. You've got your hand up. Do you want to have a shot?
Hi, can you hear me?
Crystal clear, Naila.
Hi everyone. I'm a journalist from News 24 Business. We're obviously covering what is going on in terms of the investigation and what is happening in the industry, and as well as what's happening with ArcelorMittal, etc. I wanted to just ask from your perspective. Obviously, this is a preliminary investigation and finding by ITAC. A lot of the industry seems to be impacted, and from what I'm hearing, it's not sounding good in terms of the impact. The original investigation, ITAC has said, is to protect the local industry, particularly when it comes to long steel, etc. And they've also tried to, particularly in the steel industry, look at ways to protect it. In your opinion, and from the industry's opinion, is it going, or from what you have heard, is it going to have the intended result in terms of protecting the local industry as well? Or do you feel as if there's going to be actually a sort of negative impact rather than a positive impact for local producers, suppliers, etc.?
So that's a good question, Naila. Let me maybe try to answer you this way. The industry is not one thing. So the industry, we could say, starts with ArcelorMittal or starts with the mini mills like SCOR, and it goes all the way down to someone who's fabricating burglar bars or making wheelbarrows or whatever it might be. And so there's an enormous spread of who is in the industry, and when you raise the tariffs far upstream, so when you raise duties on the basic raw materials like hot rolled steel, what ends up happening is everyone downstream from there pays more for their product. That makes them a little bit less competitive. If they're big exporters, that's going to make them less competitive in those export markets. It's going to push up the incentive to import the finished good. So if you think of, if you've got the raw material for your spade becoming more expensive, then your spades cost more, and there'll be a greater incentive to import more spades. So the whole value chain has to be considered, and that's complicated here. My instinct, Naila, is that the unintended consequences might indeed outweigh the intended protection. In other words, the downstream industry could end up taking quite a hammering, and at their expense, the upstream industry might see a benefit. But in fairness here, there are downstream products being protected. having said all of that, Naylor, so even when you get to the point of where you say, well, we're also protecting the downstream sector, what happens is you push up the price of everything in that value chain. So what we find is that sectors in South Africa that have very high tariffs tend to lose interest in exporting, for example, because you can just get a much better price locally. So there are consequences downstream. I'm sure ITAC have carefully considered those, but I think the consequences of these tariffs could be more negative than positive. But that I say without having sight of the same data that ITAC does. Thank you, Naylor. Then Trevor.
Hi, Donald. Can you hear me?
Crystal clear, Trevor.
Thanks. Trevor Carolyn from UMP. Donald, I've got two questions. One is, and I don't know what the codes relate to, but are duties going to be applied to finished goods being imported into South Africa? For example, we manufacture modular steel bridges, which we supply both locally and we export. Is it going to come to a point where they don't put duties on the product, the finished product being imported, but the raw materials will have duties, so my costs go up and it then becomes cheaper to import? That's my first question to you.
Yeah, well, let me answer that then quickly, Trevor. The answer is there are already instances of that. Look, there are hundreds of tariff codes, so I can't give you an answer today in this session on what the impact on you will be. But if you drop me an email, I'd be happy to have a chat with you, and then we can have a look at how you are impacted. What was your second question?
Okay. The other part is we manufacture certain process equipment here in South Africa for global clients, which is obviously shipped to everywhere from Uzbekistan to the USA. Now, most of the world, our clients have now arranged, instead of the product going through the US, it's now being drop shipped direct to the country of destination. However, we still export a significant amount of our production to the US. Duties, fortunately, we managed to get some containers on the water before the duties started getting applied, but it's obviously going to happen to us. Is there going to be a situation similar to what the US has done to the UK, where they've applied duties on finished products? So I just saw a thing on JCB now suddenly being affected with duties going into the US. Are we going to have similar kind of reactions from our trade and industry departments to apply duties on equipment like that coming into South Africa?
Oof. The answer there is I don't know offhand. Yeah, that's an alarming question you posed, Trevor. I don't know. Let me think about that. I'm not going to be able to answer you in this session, but I mean, there are some folk attending. If any one of them want to raise their hands from ITAC or the DTIC and answer Trevor's question, I'd welcome their response. But I don't know at the moment. I don't know. But thank you, Trevor.
Thanks very much.
No problem. Susan, if you are not going to work this time, could I ask you to perhaps just type your question and then we'll take it from the written question. Susan? No. Susan, that's not working. All right. Sean asks, do we send our submission to ITAC directly? Yes. If you're not sure who to send it to, you can let us know. What we'll do with everyone again when we send out our full pack of documents, we'll include the Gazette, which has the email addresses. So, yep, you can send it to them directly. Anonymous says, with the lack of available steel, is ITAC really realistic on the implementation with lack or resources? I don't know. I mean, I am worried always with these things that we're protecting in excess of what the domestic industry can supply. I don't know, but the one thing I can say is if the tariffs go up, the domestic industry is going to have to push up their prices or they will run out of stock. So I can't see any scenario where the duties go up and the prices don't. Is there going to be shortages? I don't know. But there are mechanisms that they're not the most efficient, but there are mechanisms like temporary rebates, which can be applied for. There are over 80 of these already on steel, and these will allow you to import at times when the local industry can't supply without paying the duty. So at least in theory, that is available as an option. Michael, if you want to speak and raise your question. Michael, you're muted. All right, we'll come back to Michael. Peter Niemand, if you want to go ahead. Peter, we can't hear you. All right.
Hello.
There we go.
Oh, okay. Hello, Donald. Thank you. The Toy Niemann from School Metals Group. So I just listened into the various comments previously made in terms of, you know, the steel value chain and the impact. So obviously from our perspective, we receive this review very favorably. And we're involved in the long and flat product market, and we're part of a bigger bonds group where we're involved in the downstream as well. So I think the initial goal of this review is obviously focused on protectionism and allowing for import substitution throughout the steel value chain. So that's important for us because considering the influx of imports from China and other foreign countries, we from our perspective, we see this as a very good thing, and it allows us to compete in the market. Firstly, we also see it as an opportunity, and we believe that we can produce cost effectively in South Africa. And obviously, as you've alluded to previously, we spoke about the rebates and the application for rebates. So in the instance where certain products cannot be available, made available in the market by local producers, there is other mechanisms that can be sought and applied for. So in short, I just wanted to share our sentiment. If duties are applied across the board and applied well across 72, 73, 82, then the impact will be, in our opinion, will be that South Africa is just protected from these foreign influx of imports, and we can compete cost effectively. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. Let's see, Michael, how are you doing with your microphone? Michael still struggling to unmute. Dewald, do you want to have a shot?
Good morning, guys. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Donald, it's actually John here. We are actually a group of guys sitting here in the boardroom listening to the presentation. I'm the director of Spillerstar. Just wanted quickly to touch on what Peter said from SCORE, and hopefully someone from Mittal is on here as well. Do you guys feel that you are rigged to supply the local market fully, to the extent that we don't have long waiting times and shortages of steel? Because we found that in the past that that's the case. We're actually a downstream user supplying directly to the mines. And yeah, we're concerned. We've signed contracts on pricing actually in last week. And from a downstream point of view, we're going to have to go back to our end user now and say, listen, on certain lines, we now have to impose this and this and this percentage. To what the end user might say, listen, you have your budget. We cannot afford you a more lenient budget. And that would then basically mean that we have to start retrenching and putting retrenchments through. So has ITAC kind of foreseen this, that there might be potential job losses in the industry for end users, and also basically steel, construction companies and structural steel companies that actually use the steel to manufacture goods for the industry?
Thank you, Dewald. Let me maybe just add something to this. I mean, is ITAC aware of it? Well, they certainly are, because a few companies have raised the concern. I mean, I can't comment on your particular business, but more broadly, this is an issue that has been raised with them. The counterpoint to all of this, of course, is to say, well, on the other side of this, there's the threat of job losses upstream. So if we don't put the protection in, then we've seen the horror unfolding with Newcastle, for example. And well, if we don't step in and do something, there'll be failures elsewhere. So I mean, I think to give ITAC their due without necessarily agreeing with them on it, but they've got to make a call. Like, somewhere something is going to fall over. It's very hard for me to see that we can keep every single person in this value chain happy. Their job is to try to figure out what gives the net best benefit. Is that going to be the right call here? I don't know, but that is sort of, I mean, that's just a horrible position to be in, to have to make that call. But that is the reality of what they are currently paid to do. I don't know if anyone from SCOR or ArcelorMittal wants to respond to Dewald. Otherwise, we're going to move to the next question. So if there is anyone that wants to, feel free to have your say. But we're not going to have a long debate today on that particular issue. All right. And I know your name is not Dewald, but I completely forgot what you had said your name was when you spoke. I apologize.
That's John.
John. Okay, John. I was going to take some written questions from Lawrence. Are the safeguards that exist added to the new general duties? The answer to that, Lawrence, is yes, they are. As well as the anti-dumping duties, I might add. So in some of the tariff codes have safeguards, anti-dumping, and duty increases. I don't know how that spread looks at the moment, but they all add on top of each other. Second part of Lawrence's question, do the rebates still require applications, and what are the requirements? Yes, they do appear to still require applications. So just so everyone understands how a rebate comes into existence, you go to ITAC and you say, I can't get this product locally, or I can, but not in enough volume, or not the right grade, or whatever the reason might be. They do an investigation. They take comment. Let's say they agree with you. At that point, the rebate is created. All the rebates in steel are also connected to a permit. And so if you want to then access that benefit, you go to ITAC when you want to do your imports, and you say, I need to bring in 100 tons of XYZ steel, and you then get a permit. That permit, when it is issued, is loaded onto the SARS system. And then when you clear with that permit reference number, you will not pay the duty. When you've run out, you need to go back, or you will pay the duty. If they don't issue the permit, or they don't create the rebate, then you pay the duty. The third part of Lawrence's question, why not simply reduce tariffs to zero if not produced locally? That is literally the billion-dollar question at the moment, Lawrence. I'm not a fan of these incredibly long lists of very complicated rebates. If nothing else, they also open the door to fraud. I'm not a fan, but from ITAC's perspective, we clearly disagree. Are import permits still required, even if the firm is willing to pay the duty? So the answer there is, if you are willing to pay the duty and the permit is required as a condition of getting the rebate, then of course you can simply pay it. The problem we have in this investigation is there are many, many more products on here that they are proposing to impose import control on, which is not connected to a rebate. And we don't know what those rules are, but in those cases, you typically, if you can't get the permit, you can't import the product. As soon as we know more, we'll let everyone know, but that in principle is how it works. Annelies.
Thank you, Donald. Wow. Okay. So I think you obviously know who the NARMS and RCAM question came from. Yeah. Ugh, so unobvious. So there's a couple of questions I have for you. Just obviously now from an automotive perspective, we have so many down, tiers down our supply chain that have these products. Now, for us to establish who our suppliers are impacted and the impact analysis to do the commentary, it's very hard for us. I mean, you're looking at brackets, screws, tubes and pipes and exhaust, it's so mirrored. We haven't had a response in our previous one asking for an extension. Do you think this will be granted? I suppose my first question, and then I'll get to my second question if you want to answer the first.
My answer is yes. I think they probably will be granted, and I think for a few reasons. Not because they feel sorry for anyone, but if this is a massive review. If you're asking so many people to comment on so many things, and you don't grant the extension, and then you end up with a decision that someone thinks is a very poor decision, that could open ITAC, at least hypothetically, to some kind of litigation. So I think they'd err on the side of granting, but I mean, I obviously can't speak for them.
Yeah. Thank you. So I'm assuming just the other confirmation with the last deal peer, we put in recommendations on rebates on the form and how it should be read. Should we be doing that as part of our appeal?
I think so. I would not want to leave anything to chance. That can end really badly for you. So I would, yes, I would.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I mean, obviously from automotive, we have a lot of concerns. And I think also just the thing is now quantifying the down tier application. So yes, so thank you for that. We have the other thing is, have they on the first release, sorry, did they ever share commentary so that we could look and see what their preliminary findings or thoughts were?
Just sorry, I missed the first part of your question. Just repeat that.
So this is the second time it's gone out, I think.
Yes.
And again, it's such a wealth of information to try and digest. Given that the first one went out, did they ever get commentary that they could share with the non-confidential findings that they could share with the rest of us?
Yes, and if you want those, we, Annelies, what we can maybe do, again, directed to Nadia and Annika, when we send out the pack with this, what we can do is just include everything on the public file that we have. So the public file is not 100% up to date. So there's still information missing from there, but I'd be very happy to share with everyone who attended what we do have if you want. It's not a problem.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you, Donald. I have some other political questions, but I'll deal with that in the thing.
Well,
thank you.
We can have a beer and talk about that, Annelies. Very lucky to see you.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of concerns that industries as a whole have. Yeah, we obviously as automotive don't think this has been thought through, especially given that the automotive under the APTP is protected. And this is not going to counter that protection. So yeah, we are concerned that this wasn't fully thought through. And what would be interesting, and I'm sorry, I did raise it as anonymous, but it's something for those on the steel call to actually think about, if I may.
Sure.
Is with all these increased tariffs that SARS is actually planning to, they're going to get all this now additional revenue through the duties. It would be interesting for me to understand, and maybe the industry can tell us, are they going to see any of their money to help them develop, their infrastructure and to help them recover? Because I sometimes think this is actually quite, they're getting SARS is getting all this revenue, but how is it actually helping ARMSA and all the local producers? So it was just an interesting thought. I was thinking that I don't have an answer for. Yeah.
I absolutely have an answer for you. No, they don't. Our tax laws don't allow that to happen. So all of our money that's collected in all taxes goes into the National Revenue Fund, and then Treasury allocate that by way of the budget. There is no ring fencing allowed of steel tariffs benefiting the steel industry. The DTIC, for example, as part of their allocation, can decide they want to give some support, but other than that, no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Okay.
thank you. It was just a thought. Thank you.
You're welcome. There've been quite a lot of questions on specific products. I'm not going to answer those simply because, like I said earlier, there are hundreds of these tariff codes, and I'm not going to run through all of them now. Nico asks, are previous safeguard applications still active and relevant, particularly in hot rolled coil? Nico, I believe so. I need to double check it. That is again quite a specific product question. If you drop me an email afterwards with the tariff codes you're interested in, very happy to quickly give you an answer. Anonymous asks, has any mention been made that BEE is going to become a criteria in order to obtain an import permit? That is a very good question. That has not been dealt with in this Gazette, but if we have a look at ITAC's annual performance plan and ITAC's strategic plan, they are quite explicit that they have an intention to make BEE a criteria in the issuing of permits. Now, we don't know the detail of what the levels required will be, etc., but it certainly would appear to be on the horizon, although not specifically noted here. Added to that, I might point out that that actually flows over into employment equity as well. All of the rebate applications, tariff changes, etc., have a requirement for compliance with labor laws. And given that the employment equity laws are now in place, we believe it follows from there that that too can become a consideration. Chair Paul, I'm not going to answer your question on the steel products because it's too specific. We don't know exactly when it will take effect. We know that the minister views this as being very urgent. So I'm assuming we get to next Wednesday. Then after that, there'll be some extensions granted. Then have to go to a commission meeting. So I mean, it's just a wild guess here, but I would think 2 to 3 months from now is likely, but you can't hold me to that, please. Susan, your hand remains up. You are tenacious, if nothing else. Do you want to have another shot at this? Let's see if we can hear you. No, we're not hearing you, Susan. Michael Engelbrecht, do you want to unmute? No. Ryan, I'm not sure if that's a legacy hand or you have another question.
No, it's a new hand, and it's just to, and as a very much a downstream end user person, and I deal with CIFA in the Western Cape, where we are mostly downstream. Just in a balance to what Spore's comment was, and I understand we all are out there trying to protect our industry. One of the things that makes it a big concern for me on the downstream is I looked at the applications and the comments that were sent in on the first round, and the big companies with the 3,000 employees have lawyers and teams of people that can produce fascinating documentation, but where a small downstream company has 30 to 40, maybe 50 people, we don't have that available. And then there's mention of the rebate is available. The process to get a rebate is tedious and time consuming. And when you've got a company of 30 or 40 and your CEO is going to spend 2 weeks trying to submit for a rebate and it's going to get bounced because they don't know how to do the process properly, the damage that it's going to do to downstream that do not have the facilities and the ability to do it is quite concerning. So that is the comment. And it's just going to end up being that those companies will have to give up. And what's not sexy is when when a company of 40 closes down and retrenches, nobody gets excited. Even if it's 100 of those companies, which is a huge quantity of people that are getting retrenched, it doesn't make the news. But when one big company is going to potentially retrench, that makes front page news. So I just feel the deck of cards is horribly unfairly stacked, and it's very difficult for the smaller companies to be heard, and therefore they aren't. And that is why I think this ITAC review has been shifted this way. There's just not enough political clout from the small people. Just my comment.
Yeah, Ryan, I mean, that's a valid point. And this, by the way, is an issue. You know, it's why protectionism tends to be so politically popular, because it's a small number of very concentrated, obvious benefits, whereas the costs are sort of socialized across the whole of society. Yeah, what you raise is a valid point. I mean, I have no solution for you, but I can't really disagree with what you've said. From Eileen, we understand that import control measures are currently not known, and that the thinking is it'll be permits. Can it, however, include other controls like additional customs stops, etc.? So Eileen, it shouldn't, and customs stops are meant to be around compliance, not as a mechanism of raising the cost of imports. It shouldn't, but in reality, what happens is circumvention rises as protection rises. And I mean, this is stuff we've studied in quite a lot of detail. So the more controls you put in place, the greater the incentive for people to figure out a way around it. And so very often it will simply follow the one after the other. In other words, if you raise the levels of protection significantly, you're going to get more stops because there'll be more people trying to cut a corner. That's about the best I can say on that. Mark, how's it?
All right. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, excellent. All right. I'd like to add a little bit to maybe in particular Ryan, just so people know who I am. My family's been involved in metal recycling for 120 years, and I'm also involved in representing the industry on a national level. So we see the effects of the decimation of the manufacturing economy by interventions, and these additional bound rates or duties are going to exacerbate that. There's absolutely no two ways about it, especially if there are not similar protections provided to the actual local downstream manufacturers. So, for example, if you're making shock absorbers, but you're paying a ridiculous amount for your steel, you can no longer compete against the imported shock absorbers. So you just close down your factory and possibly import if you want to keep your marketing chain going. We did a survey just recently as to what, maybe just to understand something. Scrap metals, scrap steel in particular, is a direct reflection of the economy. Okay, if scrap collections drop, it's a function of price, because people don't go to far away or distant places to collect. They don't collect the lighter grades, beer cans and old car bodies and things like that. So they just either go to dumps or just lie around. Then, of course, we have the manufacturing economy, which generates offcuts as a byproduct of whatever it is that they're making. That survey, which was done last month, has shown that countrywide scrap inflows are between 30 and 50% down. It's an absolute travesty, and all we're doing apparently with all of these duties and scrap interventions is supporting the ITC-funded businesses like SCORE. So not so much of a question, more just so everybody is fully aware of the effects of all of these interventions. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Selwyn asks, how do we make contact with the ITAC committee? So the committee doesn't exist at the moment, Selwyn. I would suggest you send an email to the people named in the Gazette and pose that question to them directly. All right, we've dealt with the product-specific stuff, stainless steel pipe. I'm going to skip sharing the comments on the first submissions. We'll share those with everyone. All right, I'm just trying to find others that are not product-specific. Travis says, We're one of the companies that wrote an objection, but we received no acknowledgement of receipt and couldn't make any contact with anyone on ITAC. Are there any contact details that can be shared with all for contact channels? Travis, absolutely, we will share those. If you are struggling and still nobody is responding, then please let us know, and we're more than happy to see if we can help you. Case asks a very good question. Are these tariffs planned to be applicable to the SADC region or limited to South Africa? No, it'll cover the whole of the Southern African Customs Union. That is South Africa, Botswana, Lesotho, Eswatini, and Namibia, and of course South Africa. But it'll not apply to any other countries. I should also point out that any imports which come from countries we have trade agreements with, so SADC, EU, etc., will not be affected by the duty increase. And so those countries might start to become more appealing to purchase from if these duties go up. Anonymous says, how can we as importers be assured that the import process will be free of corruption? That's such a South African question. But I can't give you any guarantees. I've dealt with ITAC for the 22 years they've been in existence. I've never run across an occasion of corruption, but I certainly can't make any promises. Eileen, do you think ITAC will call for a public hearing like they've done previously with the safeguard investigation? No, they will not, Eileen. So the safeguard agreement at the WTO has a requirement for public interest. We could request one, but I can't promise it'll be granted. However, this is actually quite an important issue. Any company is allowed to request an oral hearing. An oral is different to a public interest hearing. Oral hearings are closed. In other words, it is only the company requesting it in the room with the commission, whereas public interest hearings are open to pretty much anyone to have their say. But Eileen, it may be a good idea given the very far-reaching effects of this, nothing prevents ITAC from calling a public interest hearing. And I'd maybe ask if Annika can make a note that we maybe ask ITAC if they would consider that. And I think that's just generally a good call. Marina says, a big concern is that important information relating to legislative changes are only shared with a limited group of representatives, as well as the timing. Announcement of major changes that will impact industry, but the notice only comes out a few days before the deadline to submit. Marina, the law, it's not an excuse, the law requires ITAC to publish in the Government Gazette, which they always do. Of course, nobody in their right mind, besides the people at XA, actually go and read the Gazettes every day. So the best I can say to you is please subscribe to our blog and you will definitely be notified when these things happen. Beyond that, there isn't an obligation unless you want to be checking the Government Gazettes every day as we do. There is a risk of it slipping through. That is what it is. Regarding the deadlines, yes, they are tight. ITAC would say to you that this is an urgent matter, and so they don't want to give too much time. They may be right with that. Having said that, we see other cases sometimes dragging on for years. So, urgency is definitely in the eye of the beholder. All right. Anonymous says, is the tariff applied to all imports or specific countries? It is applied to everyone that we do not have a trade agreement with. Travis asks, can I just ask everyone who's not speaking to mute, if you wouldn't mind? Travis asks, are there any companies that would be able to assist with application for permits or to help draft objections? Travis, I know such a company. It is our very own XA. So please get hold of us. We'd be more than happy to help you. Rebecca says, do you know why, when there are no local production of my affected tariff code, has it been put under import controls? Rebecca, this is this is as astonishing to me as it is to you, but the reality is we don't know why. Now, what will happen at the end of the investigation, after whatever's been implemented has been implemented, ITAC will publish a detailed report, and those sorts of questions will presumably be answered in that report. But at the moment, we don't know why. I would say, if that concerns you, very important for you to make yourself heard again. Kerry says, please advise the steel imported from Europe. Well, you know, with an EUR1, will it be 0%? Yes. So just a general comment to everyone again. It comes from a trade agreement country and you have the appropriate documentation, you will not pay the duty. Johan from Columbus says, any view as to why stainless steel was left out of the proposed tariffs, as we only have one local producer in Africa? Johan, I am as bewildered as you are. I don't know why it was removed. I'm also not sure if Columbus made a submission. So, I mean, that in itself might pose part of the problem. But I mean, of course, I don't know for sure. Don't know. If you think it should be in, you know, the document is still open for comment. So I don't think there would be anything prohibiting you from making yourself heard at this point. I've answered the question on the SARS revenue, so I'm going to skip that. Did you say that stainless steel is now not mentioned, that this is for mild steel? Will this be a precursor for other industries? Anonymous, I have absolutely no idea. I wouldn't read anything beyond what is in this document into any of this. Chantel asks, we're currently importing, I'm going to skip your comments on the particular tariff codes. Could you clarify whether the IE 461 import permit requirement will be enforced immediately following the Gazette? So, Chantel, this is when the final position is taken. ITAC will publish a report. They will also publish a Gazette that implements whatever their rules are. These are typically not given with any warning. In other words, they're imposed from the date that they are published. So I do not believe there will be a grace period. That's a good question. There's no reason to believe there will be a grace period at the moment. That is a question that would make sense to get posed to ITAC directly. Gordon, date of implementation, I think I've answered that. Okay. How will these proposed tariffs affect Europe? I've answered that. Eugene, the best case scenario, that is, what is the best case scenario? Well, that depends who you are. SCORE has given their view that this is about their best case scenario. I think that would probably be echoed by anyone upstream. So all of the mini mills and ArcelorMittal would share that view, and everyone downstream from there is probably quite miserable. The problem here is there is no best case. There is just a set of trade-offs. No matter how you implement this, you are going to have a significant number of people that are unhappy. I don't think there's a best case. And like I mentioned earlier, there are going to have to be some failures. It's very hard for me to look at this and see that everyone comes out ahead of the game. Another anonymous having a swing here. The tariff descriptions are outdated. It'll be helpful if ITAC got with the program. Everything takes so long, and by now you would have thought they would have got their house in order. Is this ever going to happen? But let me just come to ITAC's defense here. ITAC have nothing to do with the tariff book. The tariff book is managed by SARS. So if you are unhappy, this is something that can be updated, by the way, and most people don't know. Once a year, you can request SARS to create new tariff codes, etc. That is possible, but it is not an automatic process. You've got to put your arguments through. And if you want to do that, you can, and then kind of off you go with it. Let me see. Andre says, how will a product category be treated if the local mills don't make that category at the moment, but say they can make it? Will they enjoy protection and the importer decline an import permit? No mill currently suffers any injury for this product category, but sure will say they can do it in capital letters. How will the intended changes view such a product? I would be very nervous to put myself in ITAC's head, but I can say where there is a dispute between these two concerns, ITAC typically leans in favor of the local mill. So, please don't take that as legal advice, but I do believe that the local mill is typically favored. Steve asks, whilst tariff protection is being applied to imports locally, the PPS on scrap procurement has a significant effect on local pricing from many mills. Are there any foreseen adjustments on this regulation to reduce the PPS from 30%? Steve, that is under consideration. ITAC have, I believe by now, would have sent their recommendation on altering PPS to the minister or retaining it, but they've reviewed it. I don't know what the outcome is. We're still waiting, but I have no reason to think that will not be published quite soon. Right, Anonymous says, if import permits are introduced, is the intention to protect local suppliers over and above tariffs? I.e., what would a local manufacturer get additional protection via permits, and would it influence the granting of a permit? So we're going to have to see what ITAC puts onto their list of products that get import permits and what the rules are. But yes, I mean, we shouldn't see this as, unless it's an NRCS permit which deals with safety issues, a normal import permit is going to be there because it's attempting to protect somebody, usually. There are a small number of permits. So, for example, second-hand goods, you can't just import second-hand goods into the country. There are a couple of those exceptions, but leaving those aside, import permits will have the effect of adding protection. Some of these I think I've answered. Candice says, where we have identified multiple HS codes relating to a product category, do we make our submission based on the HS code we use for clearance or refer to all HS codes as per the gazetted document? So let me answer your first question first, Candice. You would make your response and you would connect it to the tariff codes that you are impacted by. Second question, which countries would the tariffs be targeted at, particularly stainless steel? Candice, at the moment, most stainless steel is exempted from this investigation as it is right now. So it shouldn't be affecting stainless steel for the most part. Ayrton says, are ITAC only looking at steel, or could we assume the same for the same applied to other materials such as aluminium, brass, etc.? Ayrton, at the moment, this investigation only covers steel. Nothing prevents ITAC, of course, doing a similar investigation on other products. But as it is right now, this is only affecting steel. Anonymous says, there is still the threat of Mittal closing with an exclamation mark. Yes, there is, Anonymous. We will have to see if this changes anything. Trevor asks, likely impact on steel prices. My view is almost certainly they will rise. And if they do not rise, you are going to have even greater shortages locally. So I'd be very surprised if prices didn't rise. I should add something perhaps, which I didn't put a slide in, and that was remiss of me. ITAC, more recently in the last couple of years, has been asking applicants for duty protection or duty relief to sign reciprocal agreements. Sometimes those agreements contain limits on your ability to raise your price. We don't know here if such agreements are being required of companies. In other words, is somebody who asks for protection going to have to make commitments? If somebody asks for no protection or opposes it, we don't know if they are going to be asked to sign reciprocal agreements. We did ask. We've never received an answer. I will follow up with that again, but I think you should expect price increases. Kenneth says, we have been pushed out of the local market due to influx of foreign competitors where our product is not protected in SA. As such, we have been forced to export our products into markets where there is no duties on steel. I mean, Kenneth, the first issue is I don't know anything about your business. You can, of course, ask for protection without me commenting whether you'll succeed or not. But I mean, the option is there. There are other mechanisms available, anti-dumping, safeguard applications. These are brought as a matter of course all the time. So there are certainly options to protect local producers. If you want to understand those better, we're going to run out of time here, but I'm happy to have a call with you and explain it. Gordon says, has there been any clarity on the rules around qualifications for the application of import permits? No, there has not been, Gordon. I've answered the EU question. Vian says, pro tip, ask for extension in advance. Don't wait for the day before the expiry. Vian, 100%. Please don't leave this till the last minute and have an unpleasant surprise. Yes, there will be recordings, of course, sent to everyone who attended. Will XA be issuing a new plea or objection? Travis, that depends on whether we have any clients who want to use our services. We're not in a position to comment off our own bat because we're a consulting firm. If we are representing people, we're more than happy to assist, of course. All right, Annalise, I think I've answered your question on NAMSA and NARCAM. Franz Willem says, comment to ITAC, one of the largest volumes of steel currently and in the near future being imported in South Africa is single axis trackers for solar farms. This is imported under Section 85 and duty-free. Are we being penny wise, pound foolish? Franz Willem, what you're referring to is it's been imported as part of a stage consignment. That's not an ITAC issue, actually. That is purely a SARS regulation. If there's a conversation to be had on whether these products should not be allowed under the regulation for stage consignments, that's a conversation that would have to happen with SARS, and my guess is probably with the Minister of Finance as well, but ITAC has nothing at all to do with that. Nico asks, why would Mozambique be excluded from SACU? Nico, the reason is because Mozambique is not part of SACU. They are part of SADC, but they're not part of the customs union. Richard asks, why will SADC and the EU be exempted? The reason, Richard, is that is written into the text of our agreement. So broadly speaking, these two trade agreements say that whatever your duty is, it can never rise above that rate. So at the date of signature. So when we signed those agreements, we could not raise our duties above that level. If the duties ever go down, then they get locked in at the lower level. That is a condition in most trade agreements, so that's not unusual here. Jan says, what are the implications of having uncleared material on the water and an import permit is declined? Jan, that is about your worst imaginable possible scenario, because you will not be able to import the product. So your best bet would probably be to put it into bond and try to export it, but it would be a very bad day indeed if that were to happen. If the import permit is only connected to a tariff, then you would have to pay the duty. But if it's a normal import permit not connected to a rebate, for example, then that's just a That's just a horrible outcome for you. Does ITAC have any intention, this is from Zakir, looking into the protection of down steel processors, manufacturers, such as lift channel manufacturers, not just protecting the mills? Zakir, in fairness again to ITAC here, this review does cover a substantial part, not all of it, but a substantial part of the downstream sector. You have another shot at making a submission if you want to get more protection, and it's not covered here. All right, Susan, I still haven't got your question. All right. Franz Willem asks, how does this process tie into other reviews, such as renewable energy? They are separate. So they are completely separate. My guess is that ITAC will deal with them separately. I don't think they will connect the two. I'm assuming now that ITAC has started this very good habit of publishing a preliminary report, hopefully they will do something similar for renewable, and people will have an opportunity to comment. Sorry, it's just, there's quite a long question here from Anonymous. Let me just let all of you read along with me. Safeguard duties protect local steel manufacturers and not the unilateral lifting tariff codes to WTO codes. I'm not sure what that means. Minister Parks Tower is trying to establish a transformation fund of 100 billion. And this action, in my view, is political to create revenue to fund small SMMEs. Even at bound rates reaching 20%, it'll still be cheaper to import, except costs will affect pricing negatively. AMSA Vanderbijl Park have proven beyond doubt that they cannot maintain more than 50% capacity, let alone the fact that one cannot run a business based on a monopoly. I hope you feel better, Anonymous. I have no idea what to say to that. Anonymous, then another Anonymous, I assume, says, can't we manufacture steel locally because we've all the minerals locally? That's a complicated question to answer. We have iron ore. We've had steel production in South Africa for, I think it is 102 years now, yet Transnet still can't get iron ore from the Northern Cape to Newcastle. So beneficiation makes an assumption that all the other bits in the country are working properly. There's no evidence of that. So that's my take. Your duty increases, does this apply to material bought locally or internationally? It only applies to imports, but the domestic producers will almost inevitably raise their prices at the same time as the duties go up. All right, just regarding, it's an important question here on exports. We export most of our products, and SA steel import prices are killing us. There are mechanisms available for duty relief. If you are importing for purposes of exporting, there are special rebates available. We don't have time to cover that today, but if you get hold of me, we'd be happy to talk you through how those work. But in principle, if you export, your raw materials should not be burdened with a tariff. Travis says, if the SADC regions in the EU are exempt from proposed increased duties, will they also be exempted from the permits? That's a good question, Travis. They would be exempted from the permit connected to a rebate, but if it's a simple import permit that either says you can or can't import something, then I'd have to have a look at those agreements. But offhand, my answer is you probably are still going to have to comply with the permit. Alistair says, with reference to the PPS, I'm not going to deal with the PPS question because that's really something sitting around scrap metals. I'm going to leave that question if you don't mind. Susan, I've got a half-typed question from you, and you still have your hand up, which is amazing. Do you want to have another shot, or can you perhaps just type a more complete question, and I'd be happy to answer it? Alternatively, Susan, you have our contact details. My number's on the screen. If you give me a call afterwards, I'd be more than happy to just talk to you. Another anonymous, on what basis will the decision be made whether to grant the permit or not? So anonymous, we don't know the answer to that yet. That will be published when the rules for the permit come out. We'll then know what the conditions are. So until that happens, we have honestly no idea what those rules are. I can't answer you at the moment. Guys, thank you very much to the last few of you who have stuck it through to the end. Thank you very much. That's all of the questions answered. You are welcome to give me a shout if you have anything else to say. Thank you very much and have a good day, everyone. Bye-bye.